I'm thrilled to talk to you about the book, but I'm in a really weird place. I'm between Amy, that was incredible, and I've got a very dull, I mean, this is, I need to talk to you about how to enliven presentations, and then there's lunch on the other side, so I feel a little squeezed. So I'll try and be a little bit entertaining. I'm going to tell you the story about the book, but actually it's the story of many of the discoveries I made at MIT. So as president of MIT, I had this extraordinary privilege of being able to gaze out across the frontier of discovery and innovation. And it was really amazing. And what I saw across that frontier promises a very optimistic future. And I'm going to tell you the story of the future we're living in today and how we got to the future we're living in today and the future we're going to be living in tomorrow. My responsibility, anyway, really responsibility of the president of a university is you get blamed for everything that happens today, this week, this month, next month. But the most important responsibility of a university president is to position your institution so that 50 years from now, you are going to be at the right place. And any of you who has had any role in leadership understands that it's actually not this week that you're responsible for. It's way out there in the future. And boy, it's hard to understand what you're aiming for. So I always remind people that I have a crystal ball, but it gets very, very fuzzy 5 years out. And I'm not talking about a 5-year time frame. I'm talking about a much longer time frame. And I needed to come up with a way of thinking about where the future was going to be. And I got the idea for where the future was going to be from my colleagues at MIT. I'm going to tell you that story. I'm going to start out, however, telling you the story of the future we're living in today. But before we even begin to talk about the future and the optimism that I have for the future, it's really important that we can see, I can practice how this works. We just have to come to terms with a couple of really scary things, like how I make this go forward. That's right. There we go. Okay, so right now things look kind of bleak. We've got roughly 7.5 billion people living on the planet. Very, very sound predictions suggest there'll be close to 10 billion people on the planet by 2050. And for the things that we need, we're already not doing such a good job. I've listed only a couple things we've got to think about. Healthcare. Right now in the United States, our healthcare needs are consuming 18% of our GDP. And while it is miraculous, some of the diseases we can actually cure today that we couldn't cure 10 years ago, by and large, it's not that efficient an enterprise. We don't have enough access. And frankly, we need to make a very big change if we're going to provide the kind of healthcare that the world will need by 2050. Energy, I'm sure looking at all of you, you don't need to tell me where we are in energy. The prediction is that by 2050, we're going to have a doubling of the demand for energy. Double. And you think about what we're doing to our world, delivering the energy that we need today, unsustainable. And of course, water and food sufficiency. I mean, hardly a month goes by we don't hear about some water crisis somewhere in the world. These are very, very big challenges. And, the future could look pretty bleak, thinking about what we need to accomplish to live on this earth by 2050. But, this isn't the first time that someone has sounded the warning call. It happens periodically. One of my favorites is in 1798, when Thomas Robert Malthus, some of you may have heard about Malthus and the Malthusian dilemma, wrote a treatise called On the Principle of Population. And in it, he described an astonishing thing. He did a demographic analysis in Britain and Western Europe, and he made the observation that population growth was faster than the rate in growth in agricultural productivity. That's a terrible equation. And so he saw that, he went back and looked in history. He was a great demographer, and he said, this happens all the time. Population grows faster than agriculture, and it always ends in tears. War, famine, pestilence. Terrible things happen to reduce the population down to a level that resources can meet. And then, once you get those population reductions by those terrible means, the race goes on again. And he said, we are at that moment right now, 1798. Basically, his message was the end is near, and we've got to do some things. Actually, any of you who know this treatise understand some of the quite untasteful things that he proposed could be done to address this problem. Happily, Malthus was wrong. at that moment. He was wrong because there was new technology. There was new technology that he did not know about that was going to increase agricultural productivity enormously. Two technologies I'll mention: 4-field crop rotation. The farmers have been doing 3-field crop rotation. Guess what? By figuring out how to use their fields more productively, they would increase food production. But even more importantly, this is one of my favorites. You know, when I was in 4th grade, and some of you in the audience were in 4th grade about the time I was in 4th grade, I don't know when in social studies you studied the adventurers who sailed the seas looking for jewels and gold and tobacco and spices. And, you know, I thought that sounded pretty cool. But what those voyagers, those explorers actually discovered beyond all those fancy things that resonate today were islands that were, of course, uninhabited by people, but inhabited by birds and had been inhabited by birds for centuries. And basically, these islands were piles of bird guano. There was a vibrant trade in bird poop because, like most animal excrement, bird guano is very, very rich in nitrogen, critically needed if you want to increase agricultural productivity. So these voyagers were bringing fertilizer back to Britain. Agricultural productivity soared, and of course, that always produces an increase in population growth because the population keeps up with it. But I often think about this as growth in agricultural productivity, beginning of the 19th century, the consequent growth in population just in time to provide the people resources that were needed for the Industrial Revolution. In any case, Malthus was wrong, and I think those that tell us that the end is near are wrong for the same reason. There are technologies on the horizon that we could develop if we put our mind to. So the way we deal with a problem like this is invent our way out. So the future we're living in today. So you think about what technologies transformed the 20th century most profoundly. Any guesses? Anyone have one of these by any chance? The digital technologies of the 20th century so profoundly changed our lives, it's hard to imagine life without them. Hard to imagine giving a talk without an electronic advancer. Where did they come from? Where did those transformational technologies come from? And I argue that they came from a convergence of physics with engineering. So if we think about, where am I pointing this? That's part of the problem, great. This illustrates part of the story of this incredible convergence of physics with engineering, a decoding of the physics parts list. On the left is Michael Faraday, one of my great heroes, an amazing scientist, studied the behavior of electricity and electromagnetism, the behavior of something, without knowing what it was that was giving rise to them. He was absolutely brilliant. But we wouldn't know what gave rise to these forces until much later, toward the end of the 19th century, when I'm showing here J.J. Thompson and his colleagues, including Marie Curie and Pierre Curie, discovered the subatomic particles and forces that governed their behavior. That explained, to some degree, what Michael Faraday had observed. And in essence, around 1900, a parts list, which is ever expanding, of the physical world was developed. That parts list was picked up by engineers who love parts lists and turned into the electronics industry, radios, TVs, the foundational elements of all of the electronic technologies of the 20th century and the successors to the electronics industry, the computer and information industries. So my view is the decoding of the parts list of physics, converging with engineering, Convergence 1.0, gave rise to the technology story of the 20th century. Now, for you all, I don't have to remind you of this. You know this story very well, but it is very important to remember that neither Faraday nor J.J. Thompson was doing their work so that I could have an iPhone. Fundamental research, curiosity-driven research, they just wanted to figure out how the world worked. However, we know that. We're scientists. Most people doubt it. Many people doubt it. One example, which may be apocryphal, is one of my favorite stories. William Gladstone, who was essentially Secretary of the Treasury, is reported to have asked Faraday, why are you wasting your time and money doing these crazy things that you're doing? And Faraday says, I have no idea what the possible use of these forces might be, but someday you will tax it. Indeed, lots of tax being paid for procuring these digital devices. But research, basic research, is the only route to innovation. But it's a long way. It's very inefficient. We haven't been able to figure out any way more efficient. Keep that idea in your mind as we move along. So the product of the electronics industry, by the way, there wasn't an electronics industry in 1900, not until the parts list of physics was available. It was developed into amazing things, but like most technology stories, technology is really accelerated during wars. The war effort that built the technologies that allowed the Allies to win the war was led by Vannevar Bush, an extraordinarily brilliant man, and an army of scientists, engineers, linguists, economists came together at various sites to develop the technologies that won the war, set the foundation of things like GPS and computing that was further developed after the war. But as the war was drawing to a close, FDR asked Bush to think about what we should do after the war. And Bush wrote a treatise that many of you, I'm sure, have read. It is amazing, Science, the Endless Frontier. And he laid out a blueprint for the second half of the 20th century. For any of you who have read it, you know this. For those who haven't, I recommend just picking it up and turning to any page. He described the GI Bill. He described important investments in community colleges. He described the establishment, basically, of a federal enterprise to fund fundamental research. He understood that fundamental research can't be afforded by any company. You've got, because the yield is terrible. It's the responsibility of government to fund that so that we can build the industry and build the economic growth that the nation needs. And everything he described in this treatise ended up to be true. He was absolutely brilliant. FDR died, and his successors were less enthusiastic about this than others. And to give them credit, after a war, most nations fall back into a depression because you have overexpended your budget many, many fold. People are coming back from the war front. They don't have jobs. It is a very terrible situation. But Bush said, we could avoid that if we just keep investing, basically the level of the war investments. That's a crazy thing. He was right. It paid back many, many fold. But FDR's successors were a little nervous about continuing to drain the coffers of our country. So it was moving along a little slowly until Sputnik, and all of a sudden the United States realized that we were behind. And under Kennedy, a national ambition was set that we would get to the moon with men and bring them back within the decade of him announcing the moon mission. When he announced it, we didn't have any of the technologies. It was kind of like going to war. We had nothing that we would have needed to accomplish it, however we did. This is quite amazing in many, many ways. And Kennedy gave many talks on this. The quotation that I always use, because as I find it so inspiring, is that we choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they're easy, but because they're hard, and because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. The best of our energies and skills. He was not talking about only the scientists and engineers who are going to build the technologies and the astronauts who are going to get into that little vehicle and go up and come back. He was talking about the nation. This is a national ambition. And the way I capture this, the importance of big national goals, is where I came from, how I ended up being elected the 16th president of MIT. I grew up under the shadow of Sputnik. This is me with my 3 sisters. I may have had a different history if we had had brothers. I'm not sure we would have, because my parents were very clear. You can do whatever you want to do. Hard work, devote yourself to it, find something that you love. And let me just show you what I was interested in. In 2nd grade, my mother found, this is so embarrassing, a little essay I wrote. Oh, darn, I hate it when the slides have such great resolution, because you can actually read how poor a speller I was and what terrible sentence constructor, and terrible artist. My younger sister is a wonderful artist. In any case, I wrote this little story about science, and I wrote it about you. Little did I know that I was writing it about me. But somehow I understood this excitement about doing science. I was at home taking things apart and leaving them in pieces. And I didn't really understand that that was what science was apart. Of course, I became an anatomist. I love taking things apart. I understand how things work based on their structure. So I understood that at some level when I was in second grade. The most important part of this is this end, but maybe you'll figure out how to go to the moon, but it would be fun. One of the things that I find astonishing is the marvelous paradox of the enterprise of science. You do it, you love it, and it benefits other people. Fantastic paradox. How fortunate are we to be involved in an enterprise that is enormously gratifying personally and also helps the world. Now, for this audience, I know I just had to talk about the incredible inspiration. So there are always the pioneers, there's always the first, but you don't get to be first if the ground has not been laid by others. And there have been so many women and men who have made it possible for me to do what I did. And I'm just going to call out one of them because this is an individual I got to know. This is Barbara McClintock. So Barbara McClintock was at the Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory when I was there, and an unusual person, very unusual person. And when I was there, she won the Nobel Prize. So when she won the prize, we all gathered together, and she was put on a little dais. She was not more than 4.5 feet tall. And you can see in the old days, there were these microphones, and there was a row of reporters around her. And behind the reporters were all the scientists at Cold Spring Harbor. And the reporters saying, aren't you really mad that it took them so long? And weren't you angry when when no one recognized you? And she kept saying, nope, nope, nope. There were about 6 questions in a row, exactly the same question. They were trying to egg her into saying, oh yeah, I'm really pissed off. And finally, she just heaved a sigh and said, you don't understand. When you know you're right, it doesn't matter what anybody thinks. The reporters all laughed. The scientists rose up as if we were one and applauded. I mean, what an inspirational figure. And the truth be told, when you're doing anything new, you gotta be able to tough it out. And so Barbara and any number of women who were in the field before me are my inspiration and also helped me along. So back to the story. The products of the Convergence 1.0 of physics with engineering have changed our lives. Absolutely fantastic. We are in the midst of, not on the verge of, but on the midst of Convergence 2.0, the convergence of biology with engineering. And let me tell you a little MIT story. So I got into MIT, my appointment was announced in August. I was going to be president, start in December, and I just was racing around the institute talking to everyone I could to learn enough about MIT to manage this extraordinary task, enormous privilege. So I met with the Dean of Engineering, of course. Very important person at MIT, and he told me several things, but 2 stand out. The first was, right at the outset, he reminded me that the School of Engineering is the largest school at MIT, and of course, the most important. I said, yes, sir. I'm just a biologist, I get it. But then he told me something even more amazing. He said of the almost 400 faculty in the School of Engineering, 1/3 of them were using biology in their work. This is 2004. And I said, oh, yeah, biomedical engineering. We just started a department at Yale with 12 faculty in the Department of Biomedical Engineering. And he said, yeah, biomedical engineering is part of it, but it's everywhere in the School of Engineering. And that was the first day where the light went on. What's going on? That engineers are using biological parts. So this is what's going on. These are the technologies that I think are going to transform the 21st century as profoundly as the convergence of physics with engineering transformed our lives in the 20th century. So I'm going to give you before biology could be useful, biology needed some revolutions. The first revolution was molecular biology, and here I'm showing Rosalind, Franklin, Hooray, along with Francis Crick, Jim Watson, and Maurice Wilkins. This discoveries of molecular biology cannot be overstated, and how fast it's changed our lives. I was in college from 1969 to 1973, and even then, even though molecular biology had already kind of been articulated, it was not yet in the classroom. Microbiology was separate from biochemistry, was separate from botany, totally separate from animal behavior. No one imagined there was going to be something that could unite it all, but molecular biology did this. Absolutely fantastic. Has allowed us to identify some single genes for some diseases and attack them with targeted therapeutics. It's been amazing. However, molecular biology was not enough. Genomics is the second revolution that allowed us to do not just a one-by-one, gene-by-gene analysis, but many by many. This is the key to finding genes involved in complex diseases, and it's moving apace. The rapidity of development of this field, I express here, is the cost of, this is the red line at the bottom. I hate to do this because I'm afraid I'm going to, maybe this is right. Yes, represents the cost of the human genome, the drop. So when the Human Genome Project was completed, the first genome sequence, it cost somewhere $100, $150 million and took about 13 years. Today, you can get your genome sequenced for well less than $1,000. And my colleagues at the Broad Institute tell me they can sequence a human genome in 6 minutes. Enabled by Convergence 1.0. Thank you very much, you physicists and engineers, for getting it together to build the kind of machinery we need. Absolutely astonishing. And this has allowed a level of analysis that is almost inconceivable. The genome is inconceivably complex, but a lot of progress is being made. But bottom line for my talk, this has delivered us a parts list of biology. And now engineers are picking up these parts and building new technology with biological parts, not just physical parts. I'm going to give you 3 examples so that you have an idea of what I mean more precisely. Some are from MIT, some not. I could have given you 100, 150, 1,000 examples. It is happening. The reason I wrote the book, Anne, is so that people who aren't scientists and aren't engineers would understand this is exciting. They can understand it. It's not stuff for total nerds. It's stuff that really anyone can get enough understanding that they can actually feel like they're part of it. If you read about one of these technologies in Tuesday Times, and you say, wow, that sounds like science fiction. I'm going to talk about nanoparticles that allow early diagnosis of cancer. Whoa, amazing. And then, the next month you read about viruses that build batteries. Whoa, crazy, science fiction. You don't understand necessarily they're all of the same thing. So I wrote the book so that people would have a theme. Those of us who teach understand that our role is not to tell 1,000 things to our students, but give our students that very small tree with only 4 branches on which they can decorate it with 1,000 things. So it is exciting. Let me describe these to you and then talk about some of the impediments. So this is one of my colleagues at MIT, Sangeeta Bhatia. She's an MD, PhD. She's a biomedical engineer or a biological engineer. She's a nanotechnologist and a physician. And so that first banner about healthcare, we're spending too much and we're not getting what we need. So I'm going to use cancer as an example, but you could use any disease. So what's the best approach to cancer? What's the best thing we can do, the most efficient economic thing we can do? Not get it. Prevention, right? So don't smoke. Thank you very much. Don't smoke. And I'm not the person to say this, but always wear sunscreen when you go in the sun. My bad. I often don't. Get those vaccines that are now derided by some parts of the population. So even if you did all the things we know of right now to prevent cancer, there would still be cancer. We cannot control cancer simply by prevention. Second best thing, strategy for cancer, early detection, early detection. And we've gotten better at it. So mammography, colonoscopy, PSA screening have reduced deaths from cancer if you measure it appropriately, and I believe the studies that have measured it appropriately. But it's earlier, but not early enough. And Sangeeta, as a physician, said, we need to diagnose disease earlier. Cancer is a disease of a single cell that becomes 2 cells, becomes 4, becomes 8. Eventually, it's so many cells that it's all over the organ in which it starts, and it escapes and goes to another organ. That is too late to be diagnosing cancer because it's too hard to treat it. If you can diagnose cancer early, very early, there's a good chance that you can cure it. So Sangeeta said, why don't we use nature's genius? Why don't we use the biomarkers that the body normally makes in order to determine what's going on? So let me tell you how this little cancer-detecting nanoparticle works. The center is a nanoparticle. Composition is not important, but what is important is that she decorates these nanoparticles with a short stretch of a protein. Now, how does cancer move around? Your liver cells stay in place. They don't go racing around, outside of the place they're supposed to be in the liver into other organs. How do cancer cells do it? Cancer cells make molecular scissors, an enzyme that cuts the material that sits between cells that prevents other cells from moving around. So the liver cells can't move anywhere because there's all this extracellular stuff that prevents cells from moving. Cancer cells can do it because they have these little scissors that chop that stuff up, zoom, and they're off to the races. Cancer enzymes specific to cancer. And so she figures if I could find that enzyme, I'd be able to find cancer. So these little peptide strands include the site the cancer enzymes shown by this little Pac-Man cut. So you get these nanoparticles if there's a suspicion of cancer. If you don't have cancer, they're excreted from the body the way all stuff is that we don't use. But if you do have cancer, this little Pac-Man guy will clip off the ends of these and release these very, very small fragments. She's designed these fragments to be so small that they can find their way back into the blood. That's good. But even better is that the kidney filters these little tiny peptides into the urine. The urine has very little protein in it normally. So the signal to noise is fantastic compared to detecting something in blood. So she's designed an assay to find these signals in the urine. And she based it on current technology. So a urine diagnostic, well, that's kind of crazy. Maybe. You know, there's an over-the-counter, highly specific, highly accurate test for pregnancy. Hello, very inexpensive. So she's built her system on that concept. In experimental animals, she can detect tumors that are 1/10 the size of current detection techniques. She started a company called Glimpse Bio, and they will be in clinical trials in 2020. My view is that early detection is the key to being able to achieve cures in cancer. It's not mine, it's me. So that's an example of how we could reduce costs and increase efficacy of medicines. The next example is energy. And I have become like many people, a bit of a nut about our need to get better about how we use energy. So the easy solution, people say, oh, we'll just use alternative energy. Love wind, love solar. But the fact is, sometimes the sun doesn't shine, sometimes the wind doesn't blow. We need energy storage. So the rate limiting technology, believe it or not, for wind and solar is not new solar cells and isn't the bigger turbine, wind turbines. It's energy storage. So our energy storage capacity and capabilities are just not good enough to meet the demands that we have. So, okay, well, you can build a couple of acres of lithium-ion battery plants in the Southwest to put batteries in your Tesla. But current battery fabrication is really unsustainable. Huge temperature consumption. Batteries are made at very high temperatures and a lot of toxic waste. So my fear is, oh my gosh, you all have seen the copper mines from a previous generation of extracting things from the earth and unsustainably. So my fear is that, going forward, if we don't pay attention to this, we're going to end up with the same kind of mess that we created for ourselves today, previously. So my colleague, Angie Belcher, she is a materials engineer. She's holding in her hand an abalone shell. I don't know how many of you have seen these things. Angie's story is amazing. She went to college and graduate school at UC Santa Barbara, and she loved walking the beach. I can relate to that. I love walking the beach too. But Angie walked the beach with a purpose. She loves abalone shells. And she loves them not just because they're beautiful and strong, but she would walk the beach and think, abalone, sea snails, take up materials from the ocean, build a shell, they're protected, they live in it, the technology they need, and then when the abalone dies, this disintegrates into the components that the next abalone will pick up to build its shell. And Angie says, if abalone can build the technology they need without wrecking their world, why can't we do that too? And that's what she has absolutely devoted her scientific career to, using nature to build the things we need. So the first question was, how are we going to do this? And Angie has chosen a standard lab strain of virus, M13, which is shown in a diagram up here. M13 is, it's almost like sodium chloride now, the commonness of its use. And she said, can I get an M13 virus? Can I persuade an M13 virus, which is designed to, bind to your lung cells, or viruses bind to organic materials. can I persuade it to bind to inorganic materials? And she's done that. So she has designed M13 partly by accelerated evolution and some partly by gene engineering. She's designed M13 viruses to bind and organize battery components. The lovely rod-like structure of M13 makes them great because once they bound, they lie down in almost a crystalline array. And she has used M13 to build anodes and cathodes. She packages them into, I guess you can't quite see it, but these are just coin cell cases. I said, can I see one of these batteries? And she showed me this coin cell, and I said, that looks just like the battery I put in my remote the other day. It's not different. So inside it's different. There's biology inside. Importantly, these batteries that she's designed have the same charge density as current state-of-the-art lithium-ion batteries and can undergo charge and discharge cycles the same number that state-of-the-art batteries can. What an improvement. Oh, and most importantly, I forgot to tell you the best thing, they're made at room temperature with no toxic byproducts. Cool stuff. I came back from a talk I had given, and someone had asked me a question that I couldn't answer, and I ran into Angie, and I said, Angie, what about this? And she looked at me like horror. She said, oh, we're not making lithium-ion batteries anymore. We're now making lithium and cobalt-free batteries using the same technology with the same kind of results. So my big desire, my dream, my bet on an energy future, better batteries. Please, let's get better batteries first before we all convert to EVs that may not be as sustainable. Third example, water. You know, thousands of years we have been purifying water by the same methods, filtration and distillation. I mean, they work okay. They're just kind of inefficient and kind of expensive. And, you know, there are drawings in Egyptian tombs of water filtration setups. We really, you'd think we could get better at it. So filtering through sand is has been a common use of water purification. So this is another just amazing story of serendipity. It's a story, it starts with Peter Agre. Peter, many of you may know him. He's a hematologist, a physician at Johns Hopkins, and wanted to do science, have a little science project. And he decided that he wanted to identify the Rh protein. The Rh protein is a red blood cell protein. He purified red blood cells, purified the membranes, got the proteins out, did the standard protein purification, got the single band on a gel, made antibodies to it. It was the wrong protein. So he had this unknown protein. He should have given up and gone back, but there was something about the protein that just mesmerized him. And you all know probably that our cells, the cell membrane, allows things to pass not just through the membrane, but through particular channels. So there's a channel for calcium, one for fluoride. Anything that goes in and out of the cell basically goes through a channel. And so he was talking to a colleague about this puzzle, and the colleague said, I wonder if you have the water channel. Well, people have been looking for the water channel for decades. Couldn't find it. The assumption was water just diffuses across the membrane because there isn't a water channel. So Peter had to think, okay, maybe it's a water channel, maybe not. I'm going to go on this crazy wild goose chase. Maybe I should just go back and do the Rh protein. He went after what ended up to be the water channel. This is a cross-sectional diagram of it. He named it aquaporin. He won the Nobel Prize deservedly for this amazing discovery. There's a family of aquaporins. All of our cells have it. All living things have it. And the amazing thing about aquaporin, this beautiful little barrel-shaped channel that sits in the cell membrane, is that most aquaporins only pass water. Only water. Perfectly specific for water. So a biophysicist entrepreneur was reading one of Peter's papers and about the structure of aquaporin. He said, it's so specific. Maybe we could use it to filter water. He has started a company called Aquaporin AS. This is a Aquaporin AS water filter. They are purifying aquaporin using biopharmaceutical preparation techniques, building them into membranes, and there are homes in Asia that have water filters that have aquaporin inside. So aquaporin is the filtering capacity. Their ambition is to scale this up for commercial water filtration, desalinization, and other needs that we have. Again, when I was talking to Peter about this, he said, I could really just bust my brain trying to design a water filter, but why don't we just use nature's genius? So that's kind of the theme throughout all of these things, is nature has figured out how to do it. If we can just partner with nature, we may be able to do things we want to do. better. So obviously, I've been talking about these. How do we approach them? The problem is the way we approach them is through research. We're going to design technologies, but only if our foundation is strong, and the foundation is fundamental research. Happily, Bob Solow, an economist, won the Nobel Prize for demonstrating that economic growth in the United States after World War II, 50% of it is attributable to technology. It's great, but you'll recall that the Chancellor of Exchequer doubted it. People always doubt it. And so we're always in a fight to maintain our funding for fundamental research. How are we doing? Well, you all probably are very familiar with this graph. This shows the R&D, federal funded R&D investments. You can see this upswing with Sputnik and the race to the moon reached the peak around mid-1960s at about 2% of GDP. And someone may have a more up-to-date number where I think we're about 0.7% of GDP today. It's still a lot of money. And you can say it's still a lot of money. That's great. But you have to remember that when the United States was writing the story of the second half of the 20th century, the technology story of the second half of the 20th century, we didn't have any competition. The countries that could have been competing with us were building their nations, rebuilding their nations following World War II. So we did it on our own. We're not on our own anymore. I can tell you as MIT president, every week there was someone from some country in my office saying, we get it, we understand the United States technology story, we want to do it, we know we need a place like MIT, will you help us build an MIT in our country? So there are a lot of places that understand it and want to do it, and investing. So this shows the US in red. Obviously, already South Korea, Japan, and Germany are out ahead of us. The line that I'm tracking very closely is China. And this only goes, these are the 2018 science and engineering indicators. You know, whether it was yesterday or tomorrow or next week, China will surpass us in investments that will build the infrastructure for technology development. I find this quite worrying. I mean, I'm happy to have technology come out of many countries, but actually I think the United States has a certain set of resources and let's just say even attitudes that allow us to be innovators for the world. I wish we would do that. In order to get this convergence thing, for any of you who have tried to get people to work across disciplines anywhere, not just in the academy, it's really hard. You know, engineers learn a vocabulary that's very different from the vocabulary biologists learn. They think of problems differently. So figuring out how to fund these convergent things is next to impossible because our federal funding agencies are quite siloed. And so there are other problems that we don't know from year to year whether our research budgets are going to be funded at the level we need them. So a couple of things we absolutely have to do. We need sustained federal investments in basic research. We need flexible funds for cross-agency collaboration. You know, we do this sometimes. The National Nanotechnology Initiative got the United States back on course to be a nanotechnology leader. Many different agencies coming together. It was absolutely fantastic. The Human Genome Project, another example. The Department of Energy and NIH came together. But those are things that happen episodically. We need programs that allow these kinds of cross-disciplinary work to happen all the time. I'm very concerned about investment in innovation. We're at a time where you can make your money back in about 18 months by investing in software. The stuff I'm talking about is tough tech, long cycle, capital intensive, and we don't have, I think, the kinds of incentives, tax incentives that allow people or encourage people to put money in place for a long time. And of course, coming from MIT, I understand how important the university industry collaborations are. You don't start here and throw it over the backyard fence and have it end up in some commercial lab. You kind of walk it across. So I think there's much more we can do in terms of building appropriate relationships between the university and industry. So I'm an optimist, naturally, but I'm particularly optimistic about the technologies that we need being put in place. I think we can do it. It will happen. It's probably happening on a slower course than many of us would like. But countries around the world want to play in this game, and I think there are great opportunities, not just for achieving the things that we need, but also for building the kinds of relationships across institutions, across countries, that actually will build a stronger world. So this is the story in my book. As I said, it's not written for scientists or engineers, but some scientists and engineers have enjoyed it anyway. But it really is my effort to get the word out, and not just to adults also, but to get the word out to young people so they know that they can be part of a better future, that they can perhaps figure out how to go to the moon, and for them, it would be fun. Thanks.